Thanks everyone for being here, and especially thanks to Adil for joining us. We are here to hear about pricing and packaging lessons from the top 1% most successful SaaS companies. And thank you so much, Adil, for being here and sharing this with us. And I let you kick it off. Adil, I think you're muted.
Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you everybody for taking the time. My name is Adil. So I'm going to be talking about pricing and packaging lessons from SaaS IPOs. My background is I'm a data scientist turned data engineer turned entrepreneur. And the reason why anything I say is valuable is because I spent about 5 years building a company called Split, which I took it, through the regular 138 million journey. And around the 8 million mark, I brought in a more seasoned CEO to scale it beyond what I could. And the company is doing great and all of that. But in that journey of 138, I spent a lot of time thinking about pricing and packaging, as any entrepreneur does. So I have the engineering background plus the entrepreneurial background. So I'm going to be sharing some of the lessons. And currently, by the way, I'm Chief Product Officer at Tecton, which is a machine learning infrastructure company. Assume this is very casual, so these slides sort of came together pretty late. Don't judge the slides. And everything I'm going to say is actually available on my Medium. I blog over there. I've stopped blogging simply because I've just gotten busy with my new job, but I'm planning on picking that up again. But the point of you can read all of this on my blog is just the point is just to have a conversation about it, to give color and all of that. So that's why it's valuable to spend time talking. And I'll probably talk for about 20 minutes and then we can do Q&A. Cool. Okay. So with that, the basis of this talk is over my break between Split and then joining Tecton, I had about a year. And I was like, well, I struggled a lot with pricing and packaging. How can I learn? What's the right thing to do? Or what do companies do? And so what I did is I took a data set of 39 SaaS companies that went public from 18 to 20 and looked at how they're priced and packaged at their IPO time. Not, of course, we're not talking about the early stage. So this is, of course, there's survivor bias. There is, these are companies were going IPO. They were not early stage. But still, I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from these top 1% companies for the rest of us. And some of you actually work at, another top 1% company, which is Confluence. So the data set should have some interesting insights in it. And Confluence data is not included in here. Okay, so who is this talk for? This talk is for you if you are an entrepreneur early on in your go-to-market career, or in general, just curious about these topics. If you are a seasoned CEO, a very seasoned go-to-market expert, some of this stuff might be just kind of like, okay, well, I get it type of stuff, but just, I assume that the audience are right for, which is other entrepreneurs. Or people or executives or people in teams thinking about these things. Okay. With that, I have 5 lessons that I wanted to kind of talk about. The first one is pricing visibility. And so the question, what do I mean by pricing visibility? Pricing visibility is, it goes from totally transparent. I can go to your acme.com/pricing page. And by looking at the page, I can estimate my exact bill from the website. And it ranges at the extreme end to 0 visibility. I have no clue. It says talk to sales. And so the question simply ends up being, how does pricing visibility change across? Oh, I missed this. Sorry, the problem with Zoom can sometimes be that it clicks over multiple things at the same time. So the next slide was actually this one. So in order to make sense of these 39 companies, I break down my analysis by these sort of like effectively groups. So I divide up these 39 companies into these ACV groups. And ACV is average contract value. And simply is the revenue you extract from your average customer. From my background, from my perspective, the ACV you sell at is the most important decision an entrepreneur or an early startup team can ever make about their company. Because once you fix the ACV, a lot of things actually sort of become self-evident. And so I divide up the world into four ACVs, extra small, small, medium, and large. And I've given some sample companies that fall within these buckets that are in that 39 company data set. And as you can automatically imagine that the way Slack does its pricing and packaging is likely very different than the way Anaplan does its pricing and packaging, right? And that's why it's important to look at the data set from this perspective. So from there, let's talk about lesson number one, pricing visibility. I already talked about, sorry, it's still clicking over. Yes, I was talking about how does pricing visibility change across ACVs. So let's look at it. So here is a representation of just some data, if you can take a second to absorb it. And so the observation I will offer over here is that the smaller the company, the more the pressure for it to be transparent, the smaller the ACV, the more the pressure for having pricing visibility. If you notice, if you're in this extra small group, which is like Slack, Dropbox, companies like that, practically every one of them has transparent pricing. You should be able to go on the website and get a pretty good feeling for how much your bill is going to be based on how you want to use the product. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. The smaller the ACV, the more the fewer the number of salespeople touching the deal. So you no longer have any humans in the loop. The product needs to sell itself. Well, if the product needs to sell itself, it needs to resolve a lot of the friction points that come in the sale process. One of the biggest friction points is, how much is it going to cost me? And so instead of kind of like hiding that behind walls, you just want to be upfront, transparent about it. And that's why at smaller ACVs, companies are sort of like almost by rule have to have pricing visibility. However, what is interesting is that even at large ACVs, about a third of companies end up offering pricing transparency. So it's not and I'll talk about why. I mean, this was surprising to me. I thought that if you're selling at 100K plus, you'd probably automatically just say, you know, here's some idea, but it's not like totally transparent, and just talk to my sales. And reflecting on it, for instance, at Split was an ACV of, it was bordering small and medium. So it started off being an ACV of about, I think 40K. Actually, we started off in the early days, we were 25K. We drove it up to about 55K or so. So it was at that border. And a lot of, so our enterprise package, or we gave you some sense of pricing, but we kind of like automatically slapped a page, let's go talk to sales, because just the way our pricing worked. But this data point gave me a little bit of a pause that, okay, well, even at large ACVs, a third of companies do offer pricing transparency. And why is that the case? Well, the reason why that's the case is if you only focus on dev tech companies, your Confluent is an example. Again, that was not part of our data set, but if you think about Datadog, PagerDuty, what else? Snowflake, anybody who's selling to developers offers pricing visibility, tells you what axes I use. It tells you what's the base price per by the axis for at least one package. It gives you that. And the reason, and so irrespective of ACVs, developer-focused companies offer pricing visibility. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. Of course, developers are notoriously notoriously mistrust sales and just abhor a lack of transparency. They just kind of like automatically get turned off. And so that's why you notice this pattern. So the takeaway is that if you're hiding pricing, hiding pricing depends upon your ACV. The lower your ACV, the less you should hide your pricing. The higher the ACV, the more flexibility you have, but that flexibility pretty much goes away the moment you begin selling to developers. Is just important. And selling to developers does not necessarily mean that you are doing a bottoms up motion. Even when you're doing a very kind of like enterprise oriented sales, where you are doing a stakeholder involvement. It's not like you're selling to 2 people or a single developer. Even then, some level of pricing visibility is important. So I'm going to move to my next point, but if anybody has any questions about this, I'm happy to quickly answer that before I move to my next point. Okay, so the next point I wanted to make was the least friction package. So if you think about 3 archetypes of packages, there's a free package, there's a trial package, and a sales demo package, right? Or talk to sales package. These are like 3 archetypes of packages. And the friction over here goes up, is that there's the least amount of friction for the customer. When they're dealing with a free package, they can, they don't have to talk to anybody. They can try out the product, then trial, then sales demo. And I called something a least friction package. If you're offering n number of packages, the least friction package is the package that has the least friction. So for instance, if you're offering free and trial as 2 types of packages, then your LFP is free, right? If you're offering all 3, you're saying free and there's a trial and then there's a sales demo, then again, free is your least friction package. So the question ends up being, are there any patterns that we can learn from across these 39 companies around what is the LFP they offer? Okay. And this, by the way, goes back to my own experience at Split. I was like, well, should we offer free or not? Right? We were a trial-oriented company, and that's something we thought about a lot. So just take a second to absorb this data, and then I'll offer some observations and some reasons for the observations. Okay. So overall, there's a 25, 50, 25 distribution across free, trial, and sales demo, irrespective of the ACV, right? So the most dominant form of LFP is trial, and that does not surprise me at all. But the key point over here is that this is irrespective of ACV. However, the lower the ACV, the more the pressure to offer free. Again, why? Is because at low ACV, you're typically dealing with products that are simple to adopt. Think about Slack compared to Confluent, right? Slack is so easy to get started with. All I have to do is to get on board on it, maybe invite one more person and just text them something, right? So the activation energy required to get started with Slack is very, very simple. On the other hand, for a higher ACV product, typically you're not only changing, not only is a product more difficult to absorb, but also the process change that I have to do. And by process change is everything that I have to do around the product. How my team works, how my DevOps works, how my IT, my security, all of that is pretty high. And so with simpler products, it's easier to offer a free product, a free LFP. The trials are popular irrespective of ACVs, and sales demos are pretty popular at higher ACVs. Again, this is the major contributing factor over here is the complexity of the change you're selling. There's not only the complexity of the product you're building, but also the complexity of the change you're offering. How many people does it take? How many people have to change the way they work in order to absorb the value you're bringing to them, right? If it's a small set of people, you can get away with free and trial. But if it's a large set of people, then sales demos are often the best way, because then you are trying to figure out, hey, who are the stakeholders? Who can say no? Can I give a controlled environment to these people so that I can give them the best possible experience? Now, if we focus only on dev-oriented companies or companies that sell to developers, none of them offer sales demo as their LFP. It doesn't mean that they don't have a sales demo. It means they always pair a sales demo with, sorry, I'm just going to ask my kids to take a so if you're selling to developers, you can offer a sales demo. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that always paired with at least a trial or a free offering. And again, it goes back to the unique nature of developers and how they evaluate products. So the takeaway over here is you can't go wrong with offering free or trial. And this is especially true if you're selling to developers. If you are only offering sales demos, you are in a pretty small group of people there, that do that. And pretty much it's best for you to then charge a high amount of money for that sort of an offering. From here, I'm going to move to my next point, but I just wanted to take a pause and see if anybody has any questions or comments that I can address.
Adil, quick point. Are you referring to trials as paid here?
No, it could be paid, it could be unpaid, doesn't matter.
So what's the difference between free and trial?
Free is free into perpetuity. There's some limited functionality of the product that's available for free. And trial is typically a full experience of the product, just time bound.
Got it. Thanks.
So I'm going to move on to my next lesson. The next lesson is what is the revenue impact of free? So I just talked about 25% of companies offer free as their LFP. So is there an impact amongst, again, I'm talking about, for those who joined late, I'm talking about a data set of companies, 39 companies that went public, between SaaS companies that went public from 2018 to 2020. So relatively recent IPOs. And since they're IPOs, I'm assuming they're best in class companies. And because of IPOs, they have public data. So that's why I'm talking about them, not say Segment that got acquired by Twilio. Hard to get numbers for Segment. Again, Segment is a great company. So then the ones who are using free, what is there a difference that what is the revenue impact? Is there a difference in revenue growth rate at IPO between companies that offer free, trial, or demo as their LFP? And this is important because if there's a big revenue difference, then that should go into your equation around, yes, free might be painful, but at some point, if it actually gives you a significant improvement, then your growth rate at IPO is going to be amazing. And growth rates are tied to what's your market capitalization at IPO time, which is something I don't prove in this presentation, but it's a topic for my future blog post. In any case, so let's just absorb this data for a second. So what is this? This is, okay, if I look at those 39 companies, divide them up by those offering free, trial, or sales demo as their LFP, and then look at what is the year-over-year total revenue growth at the time they were IPOing, right? So typically for the go-to-market oriented people in this audience, usually the rule of thumb that they say is that the best companies, when they start off, they triple, double, right? So they start, let's say, with 1 million, then they go to 3 million. That's tripling. Then they go to 9 million, 8 to 9 million, right? That's another tripling. Then they double, they go to 16. From there, they go to 32. Then they go to 16 to 32 to 74, 64. Sorry, my online math is bad. So I didn't get that right. It's usually triple to 3, then triple again to 9. Let me get that for you guys. Okay. Triple, double. I forget what the exact growth rate usually ends up being. If anybody knows of their top, yeah, right here. So you get to 2, then to 6, to 18, 36, 72, and then 144, right? That's, so at this point, you're still 100%ing. That's what the best companies are doing in any case. So going back to my analogy over here, so, or my data set over here, companies that offer free as an LFP are growing at IPO at almost 30 points difference than those that offer a sales demo. And for the statistically minded people, this is actually a statistically significant difference. This is not a fluke. This is actually a difference. You can bet on it. is that when you offer free, you outpace, your growth rate outpaces if you only offer a sales demo, irrespective of your ACV. Now, the difference between free and trial is not statistically significant. It could be purely by chance. But you see, I mean, my heart tells me that there is a difference between offering free versus trial. And so the question ends up being, well, could it be that the reason why free, for, again, the statistically minded amongst us, we would be like, well, it could be that free companies that offer free as an LFP have a higher growth rate at IPO time, but it could be that they are IPOing at a lower revenue, right? So maybe they're IPOing at 100 million revenue, where those that are offering sales demos are IPOing at 200 million revenue. That's not the case. This is the average implied ARR for these companies that IPO, pretty much the same. A little bit of difference here or there, but they're all roughly IPOing at the same revenue. So that means that at the same level revenue scale, companies that offer free as their LFP are outpacing companies that don't. And that is huge. So why is that? Why could this be happening? Well, the reason this could be happening, there are a number of different hypotheses that I would offer. Well, first is the second order revenue effects of training a large set of people on your product, right? So fundamentally, the question that I used to ask at Split is, what is the value to Split of one user trained on our product, even if she's paying us $0, right? Well, the value is pretty high. Why? Because especially in developer-oriented products, these people might actually move on from, people developers switch jobs every 2 years. So they may take your product with them to another company. That's the second order revenue effect. They may talk about it to their friends. They may talk about it at meetups. They may talk about it on Reddit. So there's a lot of brand building that happens for free. When you offer something for free, that is just amazing. It gives you second order revenue effects. The other thing, I think your product team is just forced to create a simpler product, and simpler products, simpler onboarding, simpler operating experiences, simpler learning experiences just lead to better growth rates. Also, the third thing is the third hypothesis I have is that pretty much every category that's worth fighting for eventually ends up having somebody who comes from below you. They start attacking, even if you started addressing the SMB market, then you went up market to mid market, then you went up market to enterprise, right? Let's say you did that. 5 years down the road, by the time you're IPOing, or you're getting close to IPO, somebody is going to come and try to eat your lunch from below you. And so by offering a free product, you actually suck the oxygen out of the air for those companies. And so you retain that entire TAM for yourself, or maybe for the number one, number two, number three player in the market. So wherever the revenue leakage that would happen on number 4, number 5, number 6 player in the market does not happen, because you're offering a free product, and those people stay with you effectively. And then the last reason is that free to pay, it might not even be a revenue stream for these people. It may just be a great lead generation mechanism for these people. And that's why you end up just getting highly qualified leads. So your sales team is more efficient, and that's why you end up having a better revenue growth rate. So those are some explanations that I would offer. And the key thing over here, there was a point about developer tech over here, but regardless, I think, the point about developer tech that I did not offer over here is that if you're selling to developers, the growth trajectory, at IPO for companies that were selling to developers was about 60%. They were growing 60%. So going back to this, so if free is growing at 64.5%, selling to developers, irrespective of your LFP, basically amounts to 60% growth rate. And since a lot of developer tech offers free, the implication over here is that this growth rate could be high because of developer-oriented companies as well. And that is something that I still am trying to grok, but just an observation. In any case, the takeaway over here is that offering a free product gives you revenue wings. Of course, it doesn't come easy. And if you don't offer a free product today, you're at a company or you're a founder and you don't offer a free product today, it doesn't mean that I expect you to, or I'm recommending to you, go build a free product. It depends upon your category. It depends upon your DNA. The best time to start a free product is from day one. The second best time was yesterday. But before you offer for a free product, it's important to actually make sure that this is the top priority for the CEO. It cannot be a PM or a director of product-led initiative. It's a CEO level strategic objective. Otherwise, it's going to fail because you have to then staff your company with the right people who think the right way about free. So it's not just go add a free package to your company, to your company's offerings. Okay, the one last thing that I'll offer is some lessons on, I think this is lesson number 5. I got the numbering wrong. Trial duration and fulfillment. Now, if you move from free to trial, what are the best practices associated with trials? And again, Rohit asked this question, what do I mean by trials? I mean, by trials, I mean a time delineated product offering, which gives you pretty much the full capabilities of the product available to you for a certain amount of time. And at the end of that time, those either you flip to a free product, which is of limited offering, or your access gets cut off. That's what I mean by trial. Okay, some quick best practices. The median trial length is 30 days. I think that's also the mode. Some companies try to do 14-day trials. The lower the ACV, the more aggressive the trial durations, right? If you're selling something for 25K, you're trying to sell it, do a trial of about 14 days. That's pretty common, but the median is about 30 days with some variability based on very low ACV versus very high ACV. 80% of companies fulfill trial immediately, and that's one of my pet peeves. I had that at Split for a while and I hated it, and we got rid of it eventually, where somebody asked for a trial and then a sales rep has to fulfill the trial, or an SDR. I hate that. Don't do that. At that point, you're just adding friction for no reason. And so you're taking away from the benefit of the trial. And then 90% of the companies do not require credit cards. The only ones that do are the ones who are really aggressive about free to paid conversions. They tend to be extra small ACVs. Lastly, monthly versus annual billing. Should we offer monthly or billing or annual billing? Your CFOs want annual billing. Your CEO might want monthly billing. This is especially true for developer tech. Which one should you do? Let's look at this data. So the smaller the ACV, the more common is monthly billing. Makes sense. Nothing too surprising. But monthly billing even exists at larger ACVs. This is primarily because of the developer buyer. Again, I'll take a look at the developer buyer in just a second. But out of those 39 companies, the ones that were at large ACVs, 13% of them were still offering a monthly billing. So I was surprised by both ends of this distribution. I expected all extra small companies to offer monthly billing because your ACV is so small that it almost makes sense for you to offer monthly billing. And I was not expecting any of the large companies to be offering monthly billing. But the reason why that happens is because of this graph. If you hone in only on those that are the engineering buyer or the developer buyer, they all offer a monthly billing, even at the large scale. So that's the basic message. Monthly billing is popular. Again, it's the unique nature of your buyer. So this is the main takeaway. If you're a low ACV or developer focused company, always offer monthly billing. Now at Split, I did not. And I did not because I was offering a free product. And I felt that was worth the trade-off. That if I was offering free, I should not offer monthly, because one of my goals was to drive up my ACV. As I mentioned, I was already in the medium ACV territory, so I was about at 55 or so. And the goal was to drive it further up to say 75 or so. At that point, going back to now you're getting close to this territory, this territory where, you have the choice of not offering monthly billing. So with that was my last slide. Any questions? And let me go connect to my power source while you ask questions, if any. Or if nobody has questions, I'm more curious about, does any of this not jive with your experience? And I would love to hear, how does this
I have a
contradict?
question.
Sure.
I'm curious, in the trial periods that you looked at, if you found any patterns around offering the premium add-ons during the trial period, or that kind of like, I know there's upsells often for a more elite package, and I'm wondering about offering those or not offering those during the trial period, sort of add-ons and upgrades.
Sorry, let me move to a power source real quick, and I'll answer your question just a second. Connect kar denge. So, so I took a pretty long break to answer that question, but no, I don't have data to back up any concrete evidence over there. Something that I can definitely look into. My intuition or my memory, the way my memory serves me, that my intuition is that most people were offering a lot, pretty much the premium offering as part of the trial. But I don't have data to back that up right now. So does any of this contradict your experience or anyone's experience where they're like, nah, this is not how it worked out for us? Happy to hear about that.
I'll say this, so this makes sense. I wanted to add one more point. When you have a free offering, more often than not, your ACV is like much lower. So you land much lower into accounts, and then you have the room to expand, right? Using the land and expand model. So that helps you to have like typically a higher NRR, right? And then that contributes to the growth as well. So if you're landing at like over 100K ACV, it's much tougher to expand on those accounts. So I think that was one thing which,
unless you're a snowflake.
Yeah, that is like a massive outlier. But in general, I think I'm tying two of your lessons and trying to analyze like, hey, that kind of ties into that and this.
I can show you some data about that, just a second.
Yeah.
Anyway, Adil, there is a bunch of questions in the chat as well. If
I'm going to shamelessly just walk you through a blog post, which is, but just to, I think Aditya just mentioned this. So, actually, Aditya, your intuition was wrong according to this data. The smaller the ACV, the smaller the net dollar retention. Same set of data set of companies, 39 companies. What's their net dollar retention? Now, of course, it's the difference between 115% and 120% is, or on an absolute scale, is not that much, but on a compounding scale, it actually matters.
Right.
And so it's actually not true that the lower the ACV, the higher the NRR.
Right. I think this is kind of, I follow Asana and Slack's, or the companies which have the lower ACV. I think what hurts them is like a lot of churn, like a lot of those smaller businesses kind of, go out of business, or they don't renew, or they move on to something else. But I was thinking more as like an absolute level, right? Like if you start off small, you have more scope to expand in that account that way. more than like the aggregate. But aggregate, it makes sense because it's tough. There'll be a lot of churn, like their renewal rates are much lower typically if you're selling into much smaller ACVs. At least
in my experience, from like, again, it's a data point of one, and there's some experience from Tecton. I'm still early in that experience. In my experience, starting with a low ACV, even if you land an enterprise account, even if you land an enterprise account, you start with a low ACV, your NRR is not going to be really high.
Interesting.
Why? Because there's less skin in the game. And it's also inversely proportional to the complexity of change you're bringing. So if you're selling a simple product, then your NRR might be high, even if you start at a low ACV. But if you're selling a complex product and you land small, the people who are your sponsors may move out, may lose championship, and so you end up. It's almost better to to actually make sure your ACV is related to the complexity of the product you're selling. So, for instance, Rohit is selling a reasonably complex product. If he starts with a very low ACV, he's going to have high churn, in my opinion. But in any case, let me just quickly, any pointers? Okay, so there were a couple of questions. Please share your blog. Okay, credit cards are now required for all trials. That's a comment. I don't know how to interpret that comment. I wonder if the lack of credit card required is because the mature marketplace offerings that draw down on existing cloud commits.
Yeah, so the question kind of, did you make any notes or see any statistics in the data about how many of these companies that do offer a free trial offer something that draws down on cloud commits that they already have, or an enterprise already has existing to, say, AWS, Azure, or GCP?
No, I don't have that data. That's a good one to kind of like go into.
Yeah, I think one thing I would mention there is because I had experience with that at Confluent. Most folks who use marketplace are infra dev companies, right? So for the non-infra dev companies, there is no cloud, right? You provide only one cloud. Like the Twilios of the world are developer focused, but there's no cloud, so you cannot really burn down on commit, but still you end up getting free trials. So I've seen that as well.
Though I think Confluent requires a credit card. I was trying to get that data set because they ask you to spin up a cluster, and I was like, damn it, I don't want to give my credit card right now. I gave them a fake email, but I couldn't give them a fake credit card.
Yeah, we're trying to get it.
So happy I just got this quote on record.
Well, but I'm not your ideal user, right? I'm just trying to get data for a blog post.
You are not the ideal user, but it is a good proof that it's adding friction.
I think it's a big one for SMBs, especially like the smaller companies. So.
Yeah, and the key data point that I was just showing is 90% of companies don't require a credit card. So if you're amongst the 10%, you better have a very good reason for adding that friction. Okay. Any more details about pricing transparency? When and how how is it best shared? I'm not sure what shared means over here. Any more details about pricing transparency? Let's go back to where's my presentation. I think beyond, okay. Can you see my presentation or not at this point?
No, we see a blog.
Yeah, I think you have the presentation.
It's in a different window. Let me just move it over here. Pricing transparency. I think I think to me, I'll go back to the first, the key lesson that I would want everybody to take away from this if they forget everything else. The most important decision you can make in the history of your company is to fix your ACV. Once you've decided what your ACV is going to be, a lot of go-to-market questions actually come from that, get answered by that. And so pricing transparency is extremely important when you have low ACV. If as you get to higher ACVs, it becomes less and less important unless you are a developer-oriented company. I think beyond that, I don't have any more interesting insights to offer. Any cost per acquisition for those free customers? Nope, I don't have any insights on that. I know you and me to an extent want to avoid any sales contact entering into a trial, but you have a feeling on all the following nuances versus don't the average success. Okay, this is one of my pet peeves that people say that developers don't want to talk. I'm going to take a developer-oriented view of this, even though there were only, I think, 11 companies out of those 39 that went IPO that were developer-oriented. One of my pet peeves is people say developers do not want to talk to sales reps. And I do not believe that. I think there's I think it depends upon your ACV. The smaller the ACV, the less the developer buyer wants to talk to your sales rep. However, the larger the ACV, and especially the larger the company, the more they want to cover their asses. And the best way for them to cover their asses, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to build a case in front of their boss or their boss's boss for a major change where you are one of the vendors that they're talking to. And for that, they need to build a business case, or they need to build a technical case. Who better to talk to than a sales rep? Because that's what separates an enterprise sales rep from an inside sales rep. An enterprise sales rep actually partners with the champion on the other side and says to them, I'm on your side. I want to make this the best possible, easiest possible decision for you. I don't want to sell you anything. I want you to make the best possible decision. What are the roadblocks that you need to solve? And I can help you solve them. If in the end you end up buying from me, great. If you don't, hopefully you make a great decision. That's what a great enterprise sales rep does. And that's why developers want to talk to enterprise sales rep. Now, and this is especially true if you've bought software before. A developer buyer who's inexperienced who's never bought software before would likely be like, I don't want to talk to sales rep before. But once you've actually talked to a sales rep, you never want to buy software without talking to a sales rep, especially at larger ACV. So that's just my pet peeve of mine. So
are you using sales rep as a proxy to like a sales engineer, solution engineer also?
Correct. All of that.
Okay.
And so when you say, okay, well, I know you want to avoid any sales contact when entering into a trial. So again, that depends upon your ACV but you have of the folks that do involve sales versus don't the average success.
Or growth rate.
I think so. So I think there's an implied representation of that over here. I think this sort of answers your question because at the sales demo level, which means that the least friction package you're offering is a sales demo. You're not offering a free or trial. Then you have to talk to a sales rep. At that point, your growth rate is 35% at IPO. Whereas the growth rate, if you're offering free, is 64%. Now in trial, it's muddy, right? You could be doing a trial that does not involve sales. You could be doing a trial that does involve sales. And so that's why I think it sort of answers your question that there is a significant difference in growth rates.
Do you have any thoughts on price setting? Like, how do you figure out what's the right price for your product? We have had two different ways to do it at Confluent. One is about going and talking to customers, figuring out like pitching the product and asking them what they would pay. The second is like thinking of something called price experimentation, which is like, hey, can you start at some price point and actually experiment with net new customers by increasing the price? Do you have any thoughts on that?
All right, it's getting to bedtime for my kids, so you're hearing a little bit of commotion in the back. Sorry, could you repeat your question? Could you repeat the second option again? You said one is just go talk to your customers.
Yeah, the second one is essentially build something like a price experimentation in the product where you kind of set the price at some point, and then you essentially start increasing the price only for net new customers to see at what point you start seeing a tipping over point, right? Like, so you can see how much at what rate does your price start failing? So then in one model, you can start from the bottom and go up. In the other model, you just have to be very conscious about figuring out the right price from the get-go.
Yeah, so I can give a perspective for an early stage company. I cannot give perspective for a confluent stage company, of course, just because my experience is not at that level. My experience is at starting a brand new company, figuring out your price. I think the best way is the latter. You start really high. Actually, I would switch what you were saying by a little bit and say you actually start really high. You get thrown out of the room enough number of times, you bring it down, you bring it down, you bring it down until you get to a point where you're like, I'm getting repeatable success at this level. Rule of thumb is, especially for one of the reasons why your first VP of sales actually is so successful sometimes is because she comes in and she doubles the price right away. Whereas the founder never wanted to do that because they never wanted to lose a sale. A good VP of sales comes in and says, you're selling it too low, let's double it, right? And so the point simply being that most products are undersold or underpriced. And I would always
if I can just chime in for a minute, Ram, to answer your question, there's this book called Monetizing Innovation, right? It has an entire chapter devoted to this. Just read it recently. Chapter 4 has 5 ways to do it. And if you're large and have a lot of customers, they have a lot of data-driven approaches too, versus the 2 extremes you talked about. So it's actually laid out rather well in chapter 4 of that book. And the only reason I remember chapter 4 is I just read the book.
It's from those pricing consultants, right?
Yes, it is from those pricing consultants. Yeah, everyone knows them. I forget the company's name, but yes, it's that book.
I have a question following Ram's one. So Adil, this is a great presentation. Thanks for that. So I'm building a SaaS startup for pricing, helping customers to decide the prices for their SaaS product. I'm wondering if you have any advices to offer to benchmark the price for a SaaS product to begin with, so that they avoid overcharging or undercharging as much as possible.
I think the answer, I'll attempt an answer. I think it depends upon whether you are in an existing category or brand new category. So Confluent is a difficult one because it was a brand new category. If I'm now bringing a brand new APM to market, application performance monitoring, like a Datadog or New Relic to market, that's easier. But if I'm building a Split, or I'm building a Confluent, or I'm building a Tecton, which are all brand new categories, then I almost say that there's no benchmark. Then just go as high as you can, because you are trying to establish what is the value of this category, right? And so, okay, so if you're building another APM or another Twilio, another segment, how would you price that? Well, it depends upon your strategy. Are you trying to, is your unique angle that you see, okay, well, the incumbents in the market, the Twilios of the world, let's say I'm building the next Twilio. The Twilio of the world has went up market and has left the SMB sector very underaddressed. So now is the time to attack that market and build a simpler product. And so you almost have to go very cheap at that point. On the flip side, you could say, well, there's a Slack, and Slack, I'm competing with Slack, and Slack is bottoms up, sort of like SMB, starts with SMBs, now mid-market enterprises. It's getting everywhere. Now I want to compete with them. I cannot go SMB because they're the champions of that. So I almost have to go opposite of that. I have to go now sell to enterprises, and I have to build the best possible enterprise solution over there. Then my ACV, or the way I price, might actually have to be very different than the way, it's almost like a statement you make at that point, right? So I think that it becomes easier if you are in an existing category. Or the other thing you could do in an existing category is just say, I don't have a choice. I just have to do what the incumbent does. If I'm competing with Salesforce prices per seat, I can only price per seat. And if Salesforce has established that the price per seat is $200 per seat, I cannot go above Salesforce because Salesforce offers so much more value. So I almost have to go undercut Salesforce, and that's what we did at Relate IQ, for instance, competing with Salesforce, offer at like $50 a seat or whatnot. Now, on the flip side, if you're doing a brand new category, then you almost have to go, okay, I'm going to get the most possible value out of this, no matter my strategy. Even if it's a bottoms up, I'm going to price it really high per seat, potentially. That's one approach to it. And I have less sort of concrete thoughts on that idea.
That's very helpful. Thanks.
So one quick survey or question for you folks: is there any let's say you just saw this entire talk, what would be some other questions that you would ask that I could kind of like dig deeper into? Presumably there were things that I could answer without talking to sales reps from these 39 companies. What would be other questions you would ask of this data set that I could answer? That would be.
I would ask for this, like a split across within the SaaS, like not all SaaS companies are the same, right? So some would be productivity, some are data infra, some are something else. So it would be interesting to see that split as well.
I would second that. That's one of the big questions that I had running through my brain the whole time. Is I know the lower ACV is the productivity category, kind of, right? So you, like Mike in the background pointed out to me that ACV can be used as a proxy for that. But it would be interesting to have this categorized as like, you know, Confluent obviously offers a lower tier, and you could use that data as sort of that.
I would also be curious on how frequently do those companies change their pricing? Because some need to change pricing, but it's hard to do it that much, and there is cost to doing it. Like how many times can you change your price before the IPO?
I mean, when it comes to pricing, the really interesting question would be actual list price versus ASP, which that will never get released, but it'd be a fun number to see.
The one thing I noticed was that when a company was offering both monthly and annual billing, the annual billing was 20% discount on average compared to monthly. I was like, oh, that's a pretty interesting data point. So the thing, so I would almost, I think I would almost divide this up not as productivity or whatnot, but as buyer profile, right? So the product that you're selling to a developer is different than the product that you're selling. By developer, I mean, it could be a VP of engineering, a director of engineering, or a single engineer, versus if you're selling to a sales person, VP of sales, individual sales, director of sales, sales ops, or marketing. So if you notice in the extra small category, you've got some productivity stuff like DocuSign, Asana, Slack, but you've also got, and Zoom, but I think there are potentially some developer-oriented ones too. I can't tell which ones are these. But for instance, in small companies, JFrog is not a productivity play at all. Same with Elastic, Datadog. These are not productivity oriented, even though their ACV is small. And actually Datadog's ACV is about, if I remember correctly, less than 15K. So I would almost argue that the right question to ask is not productivity versus something, it's buyer profile. And that's what I was trying to do with just honing in on the developer audience and then figuring out, are there any other interesting patterns? So, but a good point, I'll look into that. And then also how quickly how often does pricing change? I think that'll be a little hard to figure out because but I can try to see if I can figure that out.
I have a silly question. Is this consumption models only, or is this for licenses as well? Licensing too?
That's for all different types.
Cool. Thanks.
That's it from my side. Unless anybody has any other questions or comments, I'm done.
Time to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Adil, and thank you so much everyone who showed up, giving good comments, great questions. It was really an amazing conversation. Like I learned a ton from the talk. I learned a ton from the discussion. it's just been really, really good. So
Thanks a lot, Adil.
Awesome. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can get hold of me on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's at Adil Aijaz, and my email address is adilaijaz@gmail.com. Everything is my name, so first name, last name, everywhere. So you can just get a hold of me that way.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
bye-bye.
Thank you.